And we are live talking about Survivor with Christiana Ellis and Mike Mateen. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Mateen.
We're going to talk about San Juan del Sur, episode 6. For some reason, my notes just disappeared on me. There they are. Okay, so how about this episode? We got a little more, business before the merge, apparently, next time.
Yes. I mean, it was fine. It was kind of like last episode, not entertaining enough to watch.
Or not. It was entertaining enough to watch. Or not. You said not, and then entertaining enough to watch. So I was just...
That didn't come through clearly. Yeah, I said entertaining enough to watch.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, I think we had a really strong start to this season, and then the last couple of episodes are, they're okay. They're not, like, bad, but just certainly a little more boring. Not even boring, but just, like, ordinary, I guess.
Yeah, and even when you think, when someone tries something interesting, it just kind of fizzles out, and
yeah,
the only redeeming benefit of it is that I was kind of done with Dale. So
yeah, I mean, the whole risky play with the fake idol was interesting to watch to the extent that he was doing something, but it was also just when people are only forced into making moves because it's obvious that they're going.
Yeah, and I think he even misplayed that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because, his whole thing was, keep me safe and I'll give you the idol.
Mm-hmm.
That, I could see how sort of that would make sense, and that, then I would gain an idol if I did this. The thing is, if you wanted to get rid of Dale, if you felt that was the strongest tribe, he's just guaranteed you he's not using his idol.
Yeah.
Because he's saving it to give to you. So,
right.
If you feel like you're better long-term for not protecting him, I agree that you still got to be careful and try to split the votes if you have the numbers. But they didn't have to be that careful, because it wouldn't have made sense for him to play it unless he was just lying to John.
Right. Well, and so I mean, we obviously know that it wasn't real in the first place, so he couldn't have ever played it. Right. But certainly, if we're in the position of John and Jacqueline and we're thinking about, okay, well, at least John seemed persuaded that it was at least real, like it wasn't made up. Even though we know it was fake, but it was clear, if it was clearly something that looked made, like he couldn't have just found it somewhere, other than, or you know what I mean. It's not just like a natural thing. It looked like something that was made by the show producers, right? And it was, even if it wasn't actually the idol. And so you could get how, if he hadn't seen what the real ones look like, he might be persuaded. You don't know for sure. You certainly don't want to just assume.
Right.
But you're right, though, that the whole calculus is different, because on the one hand, it's like, okay, well, Dale, you're promising to give it to me. Maybe you would keep that promise, maybe not. But even if you do, it's still kind of a limited benefit, because it still ties us to you. We have to stay with you. And we will have just made, it's the dilemma of voting off a single person versus one of a pair, because if they vote out Missy, then Baylor's still there and mad.
Yeah, and then there's 3 singles on their tribe if they don't merge next time.
Yeah, so it's definitely something where if they've got a pair, then being with another pair is advantageous over being with with singles that are outnumbering you, because they might well think, well, you guys, we don't want you guys to have a block of 2 votes. It did seem like everyone was fairly convinced that the merge was going to be soon, and it turns out that they're right, since we saw in the preview for next time. But it also does, like, I wonder if they had additional information to know it was coming or something, because I feel like it's not like it's always on episode 7 or anything. I mean, that's right. About when it usually happens. It's about halfway through the season, but not to the point where you would necessarily count on it. But then again, I mean, maybe they weren't sure, and we just happened to see the parts where they were talking about where that figured into their strategy. I mean, they had to know it wasn't too far off, regardless.
Right.
Although it does, one of the things they talked about was the idea that Missy has more ties to people on the other tribe, and so therefore is not necessarily likely to, Dale would have been loyal by necessity, only because, like, what other choice does he have? But Missy and Baylor, by extension, might have the ability to go and join back up with some of the people over on Hunahpu. And, so that's something that they seem like they are at least partially aware of, even if they decided ultimately that wasn't what was going to decide the matter for them. Yeah. I don't know. Well, maybe, okay, I was going to ask you whether you think they made the right decision, which we can talk about now, I suppose, but it's also something we can come back to once we loop around again to the tribal council point.
I mean, I could always default to, only time will tell, but in the situation that they're in, I think so. I mean, Dale is not somebody that you want to be tied to. There's a lot of people that dislike him. Like, you're more likely to, stick with Missy and Baylor and perhaps even join the ties that they have over on the other tribe than you are to do anything with Dale. In fact, you may turn some people off that you were already, like, partnered with, because they're like, I don't really want to be in a group with Dale if I can go over to this other group. I mean, he wasn't offensive to anybody, but he hadn't made a lot of friends,
Well, and it seemed like there had been conflict between him and Baylor.
Yep. And him and Missy, and so they had no interest in. So if you're talking about, like, let's say that you're using that as sort of the key thing in there is, what about Missy's ties to the other tribe? Well, you're much more likely to be able to navigate that if you have gone along with what she wanted and got rid of a guy that's not even particularly that useful to you, than you are to get rid of her and then try to make something happen with Dale. Like, it seemed better.
Yeah. And that's even if,
I was pretty much done with him,
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking the only thing that might have weighed it in the other direction is just because they're assuming at that point that there is the idol in play. But I think all of the things that you've just laid out, I mean, a good alliance is better than an idol in your pocket any day. Because if everyone wants you out, the idol only saves you a maximum of one time. Yeah. So anyway, even going back to the beginning of the episode, Dale knew his days are numbered. He was going to try to do anything he can, which is why, of course, he shows his fake idol. I'm glad that he was doing something, but again, it's that same scenario that we've seen before of people only start to play in interesting ways when they know they're about to be voted out, at which point it's usually too late for any kind of a move like that. We didn't get a lot more from Coyopa coming back from the tribal council that night, just because everyone else was happy with what had happened. So it's just kind of a check in with Dale. Everybody else is, glad that's over. Meanwhile, though, Hunapu's got the stress of knowing Probst is coming to make bargains about the rice. What do you think about how Jeremy was reacting to that whole scenario?
I thought he overreacted. I thought he asked some valid questions that he turned into, a super opinionated belief.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have been worthy of discussion. And maybe they did, and we just didn't see it. Maybe he brought him up in but he hasn't seemed like he brings things to people in a really calm and political way when he's frustrated about them.
Yeah.
But I could definitely there would have been some value to talking about, do we really want to go through with this when we potentially could win a reward? The merge might be soon. Mm-hmm. Which means we'd have access to the other rice again, or whatever they get, more rice, or whatever happens at the merge.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, if he was voted down, then he could be, frustrated that his voice wasn't heard. But that doesn't seem like how it happened. It just seemed like he made the decision not to rock the boat, publicly, and then was just angry in private.
I kind of got the impression that maybe they had talked about it and he wasn't really on board, but once he's outvoted, he was willing to at least accept that it's like, okay, well, you guys have made your decision, so there's nothing. I'm not going to deliberately interfere, but I am going to go complain about it in confessional. I wondered, though, if there was even a little bit of defensiveness in it, just because he was, of course, original Hunapu. He's one of the people who is, who else there is any more, more or less responsible for how much everybody was eating. It's one thing for Reed to say there were, powerful personalities, and you didn't want to, alienate someone. It was Reed that said that, right? Or
yeah, and he may have been referring to Jeremy as one of those people.
Yeah. Well, I wondered if it was maybe Missy, because it was certainly Missy who, when she came over to Coyopa, was the one who was pretty insistent they should be eating more. So it's possible that she was in there too. But at the same time, Jeremy doesn't seem like the sort of person who would have just gone quietly if he disagreed with how it was going, because he's certainly not acting quiet about it now.
Right. And Missy, maybe she was, but you also could look at it the other way and say that because that's what they had been doing for the 2 weeks or whatever, that was just what she assumed they should be doing. It doesn't necessarily mean she was the one that instigated it at the other tribe. She may have just gone along with it and taken those habits over and been like, why are we doing this? This isn't how we did it at our other tribe. And I don't know which way it is, but I don't think we necessarily got enough there to just say, yeah, Missy was definitely one behind it,
Yeah.
Because Jeremy is a bigger guy. He probably was getting hungry and eating a lot of it. He's probably consuming a fair portion of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, sorry.
Having Probst come, I think just kind of end what you were saying, part of why he might have been a little upset is it's like admitting that you did something wrong,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing that I thought was, maybe a valid question was this idea that, what if we win a reward and then we'll have food? But at the same time, as much as I'm sure they were very happy to get the kebabs barbecue, and I'm sure that would make a big difference in terms of mood and everything, one significant meal like that is really not a replacement for a daily portion of rice over a long time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They would feel better for a while, but I think, another day goes by without anything else after that, and they're going to feel just as hungry again.
Yeah, I agree, especially in their famished state. They're going to utilize all of the nutrients from the big meal immediately, and they aren't going to store anything.
Mm.
You know, so they need the ongoing food. I think they, based on the situation they were in, they made the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that he had some valid concerns to address that he seemed overly pouty about. So that's kind of the summation of how I felt about how he reacted.
Yeah, I agree. I like how they have Probst walking up with a big bag of rice, and the music is coming in like he's like it's Lord of the Rings, and he's the orc army's biggest guy or something like that. You know, stomping out from the ranks like, you know, what's he trouble now? So I think it was interesting too that, you know, of course Probst is gonna rub it in a little bit, but I'm glad that he specifically addressed kind of both sides of it, namely one side that was original Hunahpu, who had played a direct role in not only the previous thing about losing the flint, but also then the eating too much rice. So, but then also checking in with Josh and Alex, or not Alex, but Alec, saying, you guys are now suffering from the choices of others. And Josh kind of pointed out, it's like, yeah, I mean, we were already not eating very much over there because we were doing it right, and now we come over here and we're going to have nothing at all.
Yeah.
So the deal that Probst makes is he wants to take their tarp, the pillows, the hammock, basically all the stuff that they had previously gotten in the comfort reward, meaning it's stuff that they already don't have over at the other camp. But then he also wanted to take the hatchet. They have a hammer, I guess, but not anymore. One of their 2 pots and the extra flint that they have because of the previous deal. I would laugh so hard if they lost their flint again. Hopefully that won't happen, but I don't know. I say hopefully on their behalf, but I would think it was pretty funny. I mean, we're going to merge soon anyway, so at that point it becomes less of a, you know, this tribe ruins everything thing, right?
Yeah. Basically what he did was, it was kind of it was a better version of what both you and I talked about last time. Like, you kind of mentioned, like, tearing down the shelter.
Yeah.
And that it should be something kind of like that. And then I was talking about how, you know, it had given them an unfair advantage, and you should take back some of that advantage and penalize them for it. And they found that medium where they didn't make them go directly to tribal council or, like, anything like that, or forfeit a challenge. What they did was they took everything that they had ever won in a challenge outside of immunity challenges.
Right.
So they essentially negated all of those. And that's where I think the other things came from. Like, I think, like, when you get certain rewards, like, sometimes I think that you get, like, the extra pot to make them and stuff like that. And it's just not really, like, communicated in the reward.
Yeah.
Like, get some of the utensils that, like, make the reward if it's a food reward and stuff like that. I think that's where those things came from.
Yeah. So anyway, all they have remaining, they get to keep their existing shelter structure in place. Then they'll have just 1 pot, their machete, and the 1 flint. The 1 pot versus 2 pots, I wonder. I can only imagine that's complicated because they still do have to boil their water, and then, well, I suppose you could boil your water, take some out for drinking, and then cook the rice in that same water. I suppose you don't really need to do that separately necessarily. For some reason in my head, I had it like they would have to alternate somehow. But anyway, of course, you know, we finished that segment with a "let's hope it doesn't rain," which of course means it's going to rain. But it always rains, you know what I mean? It's like, that's not a surprise anymore. It rains sometimes in this part of the world. You know, some seasons more than others, but generally speaking, it's going to rain sometimes.
Yep.
In fact, actually, this jumps ahead a little bit, but they were so lucky that they actually did win the reward because they had that sort of extra little barbecue brazier thing that they were able to cook on, that they were able to drag that underneath their shelter.
That's right.
Which helped them a lot, I would think, especially in terms of being able to keep some fire going at all anyway and also stay warm comparatively to what they would have. Even still, they were pretty miserable, but imagine if they hadn't had that.
Yeah.
Or if they hadn't just had the big meal, could have been worse.
Definitely could have been worse.
So anyway, though, as they go into the arena for the duel, when Koyopa comes in, it's only really Natalie and Julie that care that Kelly is gone. But that's part of what gives us just the clue that at least those two are still thinking of themselves as allying with the girls on the other side. The ones they knew from before anyway. Luna is chewing on a bone under the desk now. I don't know if you hear that. So let's see. Because we don't have the loved one pairs anymore, they now have the basically each tribe can just put out whoever they want for this challenge. And it makes sense based on this particular challenge that it's not one that's especially based on, strength or even really agility, because you're not going super fast through that obstacle. But I would think that you would want to choose someone mostly based on the puzzle. So let's see. It's interesting, the two strategies, though, right? Because we have Reed, who is going really fast through the obstacles, but then also he's taking some time to feel the mask and then play with the pieces as he brings each bag through, instead of getting all 3 bags back and then trying to do the puzzle all at once.
Right.
I'm not convinced that either one is necessarily inherently better. I think maybe it's just would probably come down to, your own style. You know what I mean? It's like, do you feel like you're going to be able to better sort of multi-process thinking about the puzzle while you're going back and forth, or whether you try to just remember it as you go? I mean, you're certainly dealing with, like, if you feel like you can decide which pieces are which from your first 2 bags before you've even gone back for the 3rd bag, that could help, but it also, does it help enough that it makes up for the extra time you spend doing that before you go get your 3rd bag?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it really just depends on... Mm-hmm. Reed's clearly worked. Mm-hmm. But I was unsure. I mean, I kind of felt like Jacqueline's was going to work, but she...
it was Baylor.
Baylor's was going to work. But one of the problems that she had is that she also didn't move very quickly through the obstacle course. Mm-hmm. Then we also saw that she didn't get a lot of pieces correct. So it's not... that's... When I was watching, I was like, well, that seems like what I would probably do, what she was doing. I was like, but she's not moving very quickly, so she's losing the advantage of getting ahead by, getting to the thing, so. Mm-hmm, and then she obviously didn't memorize it properly anyway, so.
Yeah, I think that, we saw a little bit of her feeling the model and saying to herself, like, okay, 2 up and 2 in or something like that. But I guess whatever details she was kind of fixating on were probably not ultimately the ones that would help her distinguish the correct piece from the decoy pieces. Okay. It's like if they're all shaped approximately the same, but she didn't remember to say, okay, well, this part is round right here instead of triangular. That's maybe what allowed. Like, for example, I was pretty impressed that Reed had the one earpiece that was wrong for a while he was assembling the rest, but then he actually went and fixed it without even asking first. He didn't have to be told by Probst that it was wrong first.
Yeah, I thought that was by being, like, without really understanding how the puzzle worked until I saw what he did, I thought that was going to be his downfall, was that he was actually so good at it that if Probst was like, nope, you have something wrong, it would have taken him forever to figure out which one it was.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I realized when they did what he did when he felt it again, is they don't, not only are they shaped a little different, they don't quite fit in the grooves the same. So you could almost like feel that there's a gap. Like I felt that's what he kind of did. Like he felt it and it didn't quite flush.
I thought he felt that the two earpieces weren't the same, because when he had the right pieces in, the shape of like the earring thing was the same on both of the correct earpieces, but they were different when he had the wrong one. I thought that's what he was feeling, but you might be right too, is that the false piece can fit in the spot, but it probably doesn't fit as precisely. And so maybe it could kind of wiggle a little bit. It looked to me like it was the shape, though, that he was responding to when he found it was wrong.
That's what I saw, but what you're saying actually makes probably more sense, because that would have been a very dramatic. That there's two pieces that should be the same, and they're not.
Right. Well, and the thing is, you'd have to remember whether or not the two pieces were the same before, because theoretically you could have the puzzle where the two earrings are not the same shape on both sides, right?
It's true.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, though,
it was impressive. Yeah.
So Reed won, and he's emotional about it. That's stressful, and I'm so hungry. I don't know. It was endearing, his response, I thought.
Yeah.
And then Josh is really proud of him. Baylor's saying everybody's hungry, but at the same time we also know that. Well, I don't know. I guess Baylor was on the tribe that was always eating rationed, so she's also been on the tribe that hasn't won any rewards too. So, although they do have the fishing gear now, right? Because Keith was trying to fish. Anyway, though, she was hungry too, but she's also upset because, of course, she says she feels like she let her tribe down, and I couldn't help but thinking, it's like, well, not to rub it in, but that that's exactly what you should feel like, because that is what happened. I mean, it's like, one person's going to win and one person's going to lose. It's not like everyone's going to be furious with her or something, like she lost because of a poor decision as opposed to just she got beat. But still, when she's like, I feel like I let my tribe down, it's like, well, that is pretty much exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So
we're all hoping that you would win, and you didn't, so we are now down.
Yeah. And is throwing this bone around under the desk. Whenever I'm talking, she feels like she needs to be included in some way. So anyway, though, what did you think about that whole bit of weirdness with who Reed selected to go to exile with Baylor?
Oh, with where, like, when Natalie...
Yeah, he was going to pick Julie, and then Natalie's like, oh, I was going to volunteer.
I'm trying to remember how to put this. Like, it all made sense to me when I thought through it. So hopefully I didn't take enough notes to, like, recreate it. So one of the things that you've got to do, this is the first piece of it, when you're choosing someone to go to Exile Island, if you like all your tribe mates and you don't just have somebody you just want to send there, and have them and care if they're pissed off, like if you're trying to have some sort of politics with it, you have to create some sort of reason, even if it's totally see-through, as to why it's a benefit for them to go. You know, why this is a great choice for them to go. You know, and they'll either play along with it or they won't. Everybody will know that it was all bullshit, but that's what happens. So I could understand why he chose Julie, because he had created this little narrative he could give as to like why it was good for her, and she was going to accept it. But Natalie felt like, I feel like she was, number one, wanted to go because she wanted to talk to people on the other tribe, wanted to, you know, she wants to move her game forward and doesn't have her sister, and, you know, wants to keep her options open and knows about the idol clue being there. I think she felt like, that's something that I want to do. I'm going to volunteer. I think she already had believed she was going to volunteer, but Reed had just started spinning into his narrative before. And so she was going to allow him to not have to give that sort of fake story. But she didn't get there in time. And so after he did it, she was like, well, I was going to volunteer. And, you know, kudos to Probst. There's not really any rule about, like, once you've selected someone, you can't go back on it.
Well, and you know, why would you have a rule like that? You know what I mean? It's like people volunteering is way more dramatically interesting.
Right, and that's the best part about Probst, is he can interpret it. Like, say, for example, you know, he selected Julie, and she was getting ready to go, and Natalie was like, said something different, like, that's BS, like, why are you sending her? And he was like, you know what, Probst, I changed my mind, I send Natalie. You know, it would have been the same amount of time, but Probst wouldn't have let that one fly. You know, he would have said, no, once you've chosen, you know, Julie was your selection.
You took your hand off the piece.
What?
You took your hand off the piece.
Yeah, you took your hand off the piece. Exactly. It's like that's a great comparison, because if you're playing a game and you don't feel like dealing with that, then, you know, well, basically, actually, it was probably more like, if you're playing that game of chess and someone makes a move that's stupid and they take their hand off their piece, you don't want to let them have it back. But if it's just sort of a normal move and they're like, oh, damn, I meant to do something else. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
But I just like that Probst always has that leeway to do those kind of things.
Yeah, I agree. And then I agree also that, you know, it makes sense. You know, I think Natalie pretty much just explained to us what her reasoning was, which is, you know, she wanted to be able to check in with someone on the other tribe.
Right.
How it's going over there. And then she could have easily, you know, spun that either way, you know, as to say she wants to check in with potential allies like Missy, you know, through Baylor. But then also she could spin it to her own tribe as just like, well, I'm getting intelligence on what's going on over there. And it really works both ways, right? But the reason I guess I asked about it the way that I did is because even though I think it's pretty straightforward to look at each individual person's response and what they did and say, okay, well, it makes sense for each of them why they did it, just like the subtext of the way the whole thing played out really felt like it was this, there's an awkwardness still amongst that tribe that, like, they don't, like, because, you know, Julie, Natalie, and Reed are three people that were all on original Hunahpu, so it's not like they don't know each other. They've been on the same tribe since the beginning. But there was just this weird awkwardness in the conversation. You know what I mean? It wasn't like when Natalie interrupted to volunteer, it didn't feel like, oh, hey, actually I would like to volunteer. It was like, oh, well, I was going to volunteer. And yeah, I don't know if that's just the way she does it, but it felt like there was this tension still between all those people.
There might be that. You know, I'll offer up an alternative that I'm not making an argument for or against. I mean, they are tired and hungry. I mean, it's more, I guess, what I was going to say is they haven't been eating. and it was just the timing of it just all sort of misfired. I don't necessarily know that let's say they're all really hungry and really, stressed out. They all have these complicated things going on in their head. Like Reed's trying to create, like, okay, who do I send and not piss off, and how do I spin it? And Natalie's like, how do I volunteer without letting them know that all I really want to do is talk to Missy? And so all this stuff is spinning, and then like Reed just spits something out, and Natalie hasn't finished processing, and so she spits something out. It doesn't necessarily mean there's an alternative. Is that not necessarily that there's tension? It's that they have very complex like thought processes to what they're trying to talk about, and the timing just didn't click due to their hunger and stressed out state.
You may well be right. I mean, that's definitely something that could explain it equally as well. But I don't know. It's definitely one of those things that I can't quite put my finger on and say this is conclusive evidence of what I'm saying. It was more just like the vibe that I picked up on.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I'm only offering an alternative. I'm not saying that it's the right way, but if you think about like from Natalie's perspective, if you're, say you're trying to figure out something that you need to tell your coworkers that you don't have their best interests in mind for something that you want to volunteer with, and you're trying to create the reason why you need to go do whatever, and before you've got yourself like set and what you want to say, someone puts you on the spot. Like it's going to come out a little weird and a little tense, So if Natalie hadn't finished her thought process, that could be part of it. It's an alternative to there just being tension. So.
So let's see, where are we at? The one other thing I guess I was just going to say about that whole bit was just it made me think of the choosing scene from Hunger Games. I volunteer. Anyway, I guess I don't really have a larger point about that, except it made me think of that.
That's funny.
Let's see. So, when we come back from commercial, we have Keith not having much luck with the fishing gear. He's getting bites, and they keep taking his bait, but without him being able to hook anything. And I think, I don't know, it was an interesting little bit to show because it didn't really end up connecting to anything else in the episode. You know what I mean? I feel like, I wonder, we talked a little bit last time about the idea of, people getting good edits, and maybe that means that they go far in the game. And I was just thinking about, like, why show that one particular bit with Keith when it didn't connect to anything, especially given that, as far as the whole rest of the episode playing out, we really didn't even hear very much from Keith. You know what I mean? Like, he was one of the people who was going to end up maybe going, and so maybe that's all it was. That's
how I saw it. They were using it as, sort of a little bit of character development for him to help create the drama at the end. Is like, number one, we know he's one that's potentially going, so we're going to have an eye on whether he uses his idol. But one of the interesting storylines for me with Keith, which is going to sound kind of funny, why it's interesting to me, is that he literally has no idea what he's doing out there. Like, not from a survival standpoint, but from a gameplay standpoint, he's totally out of it. And I love watching those tribal councils as you just see his brain just churn while he's trying to figure out whether he should use his idol, because he doesn't know. And I love that, and I feel like this just kind of helped show who he was and how he's like, he's a good guy, understands what he's supposed to be doing, but really isn't in tune with the rest of how this game is working. Like, this little scene really added to that. So when we got to Tribal Council and he's sitting there again, and you can see it on his face, and he's just like,
it also felt like,
what? Not sure if they're going to vote,
Yeah, like we can't help but wonder, like, what he thought was happening. You know what I mean? Like, was he going in? See, because surely, if if he knew that the plan was to split the vote between him and Dale and to just hope that Dale doesn't have a real idol that he's going to play, why wouldn't he have not played his own? So, because unless they became sure that Dale really maybe didn't have one, and if anyone would be more sure of that, it would be him, because he knows he actually did find the one there at that camp, right? So maybe that's why.
Did he find it at the other camp? No, he found it at that one. You're right.
Yeah. Maybe what it was is that, so Keith found it in episode 4, which I think was after the So that, I think you're right, though, that he found the idol at the other camp.
Yeah, and John found the one.
John Rocker found the one, yeah. So I guess he wouldn't necessarily know. That said, what he could know, I suppose, is that if Dale, this promise that Dale made to John to say, well, I'm not going to play it because I'm promising to give it to you, so maybe that was why he felt okay, is that if the vote splitting was going to favor Dale going home unless he played an idol, and we don't think he's going to because because of this promise. But that seems really risky. So I can't help but wonder if Keith really was fully aware of what was happening, because I can't help but think that he should have been a lot more proactive if he had any idea that he was going to be getting half the split votes. Right. But how could he not, right?
Yeah, and I think what you're doing is giving a lot more detail to what I was saying. Is that I feel like that's where this scene connects. Is it's just illustrating that he's sort of kind of doing his own thing, and he's really not in. He doesn't really know what's going on, and they're not really telling him, and so he's off doing this fishing, and that's here's the thing I'm going to do, and he just seems not connected to the game, and I feel like that's you're just illustrating exactly how not connected he is.
Yeah.
And this scene gives us a little bit of flavor to that, as opposed to having a direct what he did and said here is played out later, Jeremy complaining and saying, what if we win a food reward, and then they win a food reward later. We understand those edits, but some of them just give depth to the character, I think. And whether that means he's going to go far or not, I don't know, but it certainly helps me understand and makes it more entertaining, because I kind of dig the fact that he really just doesn't know what to do, because his face in tribal council every time is priceless. Well, he doesn't know whether to play it or not. He doesn't know who's getting voted for. He has no clue what's going on and doesn't know what to do. And he's just like, God, I feel like he's just playing craps every time he goes to tribal council, because he doesn't really know what the deal is. So he's just sitting there and he's like, do I use it? Do I not use it? Well, I'm going to roll the dice and not use it. Oh, whew, okay, that worked this time. I feel like, and I kind of love that about him. I'm not hearing your sound.
Okay.
Oh, now I am. Nope.
Okay. Yep. Hello? Yeah? All right. Okay. You should be hearing me now. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking about the idols. We know that, because we just talked about it, that Keith has the one from the Hunapu camp. But John Rocker got voted out with the one from the Cayupa camp in his pocket. So did they put a new one there or not?
Yeah, true. We don't know.
They did provide another clue at Exile this time. But then again, we also know that they do continue to provide the clues even when both idols have already been found.
They don't give you the paper that says,
Somebody has it. Yeah.
He has it. Yeah. They make you actually go figure out that you found the place where it was, where somebody has it.
So in any case, this time Baylor gets the clue, but shows it to Natalie.
Which has been pretty common the last couple of times.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be really difficult now that everybody knows what's in the urns. It would be really difficult to justify. Sorry, I'm not going to show you. Now let's spend the next 18 hours together one-on-one. You know what I mean? It's like at the you sort of feel like unless someone was your direct rival in the game, it would be hard to justify not telling them, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the gimmick, well, and it barely even worked for the first one because I think it was Keith. He was just like, I've got empty paper.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Jeremy and Keith, that went the first time, right?
Yeah.
One of the things, though, that I thought was interesting coming just out of the brief exile sequence is Natalie saying that she thinks of herself, Jeremy, and Julie as being on the chopping block at her tribe, which is interesting to talk about just because they keep winning immunity, and so there's not had to be any votes over there. Not with the previous tribe and not with the mixed-up tribe either.
Yeah, but a good Survivor player doesn't just count on winning immunity all the time.
True, but what I guess I just mean is that we haven't had to spend all that much time talking about the dynamics and who's higher on the totem pole and so on.
Yeah.
That's all I mean, is that we haven't really gotten a lot of discussion about that. I mean, we know that we have Josh and Reed as the only couple over there, which would certainly put a target on one of them, potentially just on the basis that everyone else would not want them to have that advantage. So that's...
And are overly I think, didn't somebody comment on that? How
Jeremy said he thought that they were being overly affectionate and implied that if he and Val were still there, they'd be so separate people wouldn't even know they're together. Which I think is...
I'm not saying it's the right thing to do either,
it's difficult because I'm sure that it's not something that we have had to deal with a whole lot on Survivor of people... it's one thing for people to sort of form a tight, close alliance that's maybe even got some romantic feelings in it. That's happened before. But for an existing couple to come on where it's a foregone conclusion that they're together, that's a little different. And so John and Jacqueline is the obvious other comparison because I think that's all the remaining romantic couples.
They've had some moments themselves as well.
Yeah.
Where people have questioned that. So that's, but either way, that, going back to the other tribe, if they're feeling that way, I'm not saying whether or not it is or is not, overly affectionate, but clearly some of the tribe members are feeling that way.
Yeah.
That, maybe not necessarily, it's not that they're going to be, I'm annoyed with Josh and Reed for being overly affectionate, so I'm going to vote for one of them, but it might really show that there is literally no way you're breaking up that two unless, if it comes down to it, those two are always going to vote together. That's almost what that over affection does, is it indicates that, you don't even have that, that thing in the back of your mind where it's wow, if it came down to it, if I was on the last three with these two, and one was clearly a better choice to get rid of, could I have even a shot at convincing them? And I bet people do that and they kind of trick themselves into I bet they're here to play the game. They'll do that. But when they start showing how much they care for each other, you cease to believe that you could ever break them in that last minute scenario, which makes them more dangerous on the front end if you're thinking end game.
Yeah.
So they have that potential, but we don't see how they interact when they're under stress. So. Other than not having food.
Well,
So,
the other thing that I thought played into that is just that Jeremy was just generally in a grumpy mood through the whole episode, even on completely unrelated subjects. You know, like
yes.
the whole rice thing. So I couldn't help but wonder if he was just in a complainy sort of mood. You know what I mean? Because we didn't really get that feeling. You know, like I think there was the editing was different because when we had the bit, I think it was just last time where they were talking a little bit about John and Jacqueline being very affectionate. Even though we really only, I think, heard from Baylor specifically, I think there was a little bit more of an implication that everybody was really noticing. Whereas this time it seemed more fixated on it was Jeremy that had a problem or that was annoyed.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, we obviously we don't see, but I kind of chalked some of it up also just to Jeremy feeling like he's in a contrary mood. But
Yeah.
I also might be biased just on the basis of I like both Josh and Reed, and I like them together too.
Yeah, I agree. There's another thing I'd like to
Sorry.
address with
Go ahead.
how you mentioned that we only, I think you used the word the brief moment that we got at Exile.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that's actually really interesting that it was brief, considering the torrential rainstorm that like sent people to like wanting to quit in a regular tribe, and we didn't see what happened, where they have no shelter. That, I mean, I was watching it with my friend, and I said, usually they show how miserable that is for Exile, and she's like, maybe they, gave him some cover and didn't want to tell the fans.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I said, honestly, that's a legit speculation. Like, if it was that bad, that they were, like, hiding underneath, like, the base of their structure with their cooking thing, if you couldn't be, like, at Exile completely exposed and not maybe even be in danger. So they may have taken, like, some kind of safety precaution with them, and they didn't want to let us know that happened, so we didn't get to see any of it. But it seemed weird that we didn't see them in the rain.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to take this bone away from my dog.
Yeah. So you haven't listened to anything I've been saying.
No, I'm listening. I'm just trying to be aware of if that noise is distracting. No, I agree completely with what you're saying, and I can basically the idea that maybe there was some extra help that we didn't see going on at Exile because, you're right that being completely exposed, if you have no shelter, no fire, and that kind of rain, I mean, that's, at the very least, health-threatening, if not maybe life-threatening.
Yep. And they seemed in mildly good spirits when they came back, I mean...
Yeah. So hard to know, but you're right that it is interesting that we didn't really see anything of that if it was so bad. Because it did look, I mean, everyone was having a hard time, I think, but at the same time, Julie obviously was having the hardest time. She was the one that, called it the worst night of her life, saying she doesn't think she can do that again. It's hard to know. It's whenever someone talks about potentially quitting, that's always it's a tricky proposition. We would rather people not quit, but it's also we're not necessarily excited to watch somebody be just sad and depressed and miserable and wanting to quit and then just not quitting. You know what I mean? Like that's not really fun to watch either.
I mean, her reaction is what actually connected to me why I realized we'd never seen anything on Exile, because, she was the original choice to go to Exile, specifically because, Reed had created this whole scenario that she could go show John she could do it on her own. And then I saw this, and I was like, God, what would happen if she was actually in exile? Wait a minute, what did happen at exile? You know?
Yeah.
And then I kept waiting, and they never showed, and the two of them trotted in, smiling for the challenge. And I said, that's really weird. They usually show how miserable it is at exile when the rain. That's why it's such a bad place to go, you know?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we haven't really seen a lot of Exile because they keep showing us that one little bit, and then we occasionally hear people call it desolate or whatever, but you know, we don't see them around a fire or shelter.
Yeah.
Anyway, though, before we move completely past all of that to the immunity challenge, I just want to jump back to when they were eating the reward barbecue and having Alec call himself a meat collector.
Yes.
I just liked that figure of speech. I don't really have anything else to say about that.
No, that was fun.
So, we have the immunity challenge. I liked the big cube that they had to move and then use to reach the bags. It was kind of a neat thing, you know, nothing overcomplicated about it, but I liked it. Hunahpu falls behind because one of the bags gets stuck. Hard to know if that was something that was just dumb luck, or did Jeremy do anything that would have made it get stuck, or do you think it was just bad luck?
Bad luck. Maybe he did something not quite perfect. But it didn't seem like he was like dramatically misplaying.
Yeah. In any case, though, you know, when all of these challenges always finish with a puzzle, and we've talked about that in the past, is because they make the puzzles hard enough that it takes a long time to do, so that even if there's a lead going into it, you can, you know, have someone catch up. But even when that happens, more often than not, the team that has been working on the puzzle longer still wins. But not in this case. So how did John do so poorly on this puzzle? What happened there, do you think?
I feel like it was the fact that he tried to do it all himself. Because he had done so well, like he had kind of taken this hero role, and he got started quickly, but he hadn't. At first I didn't understand. I thought that there were two people that could work on it. And the strategy that John was using was to have, like, I don't remember who it was, Baylor or somebody, was like holding the rope taut and like pulling it. And then he was just running back and forth. And I thought that was like a strategy he had used, is place the other person on the rope to keep it like taut so I can see what's going on, and I'm just going to run the pieces over. But then when the other tribe finally caught up, and I realized, no, the rope person is outside of the solving people. And then I realized, oh, Missy's back there. And she's not doing anything. Like, she wasn't, like, putting them in any kind of order for him, at least that we could see. And the other two were working together to figure out which was the right piece. So it's not necessarily that John did poorly, it's that he did poorly against a team of people who were working together well.
Yeah. Do you think, because they got stuck, like, on the third piece for a long time. Like, they were on the third piece before Hunahpu even really started, and then they didn't advance at all until it was, you know, the other team had 5 pieces. Did they have, like, the wrong piece, and that's why they couldn't make anything fit? Or, I don't know. That's why I was confused, is because it seemed like they got up to 3 and then stayed at 3 for a long time.
Yeah, maybe Misty had, like, maybe what she was doing was, like, organizing them or something, and had one upside down or had them upside down. And so he might have run the correct piece out and put it on upside down. That wouldn't have worked. You know, and just not clicked with him because of the way he was playing was like, okay, take it down, run back. You know,
yeah.
This didn't work. go back, be quick, like you've been going quick. Like he had this like speed mentality, and I feel like that's what made him so good at the first one carried over, and it wasn't the right mentality for the next one, for the next part of the challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know specifically what happened, but those were all things that could have happened that did that. They could have had the wrong piece up. They could and not paid attention to it. They could have had pieces upside down and not just looked at it and said, "Oh wait, that actually works if you just spin it around." They could have actually gone through every single wrong piece before they got to the right one. But the thing is, they didn't take the time to look and assess it. They were just running back and forth and putting them on. Whereas the other team was assessing the right piece, placing it, assessing the right piece, placing it, and working together as a team. And the fact that I didn't even know he had a teammate until like halfway through illustrates that there wasn't really a lot of teamwork going on.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like a one-man show.
Mm-hmm.
All the more reason for him to be feeling so, down-spirited about it. That's a word, right? Down-spirited? Dispirited,
sure.
Maybe that's the word I was thinking of.
Selfie's a word.
Yeah, it's true. According to the dictionary, and that's all that matters. But anyway, though, he was certainly bummed about that. Jacqueline was trying to reassure him, but he was not, at least right at that moment, wasn't really prepared to hear it. It's one thing to be told, "Oh, you did okay," when it's very obvious that you really didn't do very okay and lost as a result. But anyway, we're heading back to Coyopa now, just for them to play out the last of the strategy for the episode. We do hear a little bit from Keith, and it's like we talked about earlier. He's saying his goal is just to make it back to where he can rejoin with Wes after the merge. But just like we talked about, given that he actually has an idol, and there's all this talk of there's talk about idols and splitting votes for idols, he was way too calm about the whole thing. But we kind of covered that. So this is where.
Are we going to tribal council? Or are you going?
I was just going to cover. I mean, I guess we kind of covered a lot of the rest of the stuff before tribal council before. But just this is the bit where Dale promises to give John his we know it's fake idol. I couldn't help but wonder. First of all, I suspect he only made that promise because he sensed that John wasn't going for it otherwise. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I have an idol, and John was just thinking, well, okay, we're gonna just have to flush that idol then.
Yeah, he immediately went back and told all of his alliance, because he had no connection to him. Like, he just voted out your daughter, dude. Like, he's got no connection to you. Like, I think we talked about this already.
Yeah, and so I think maybe Dale's promise there was probably just trying to up the ante because he sensed that he wasn't getting anywhere. But you're right that even though it's certainly more to offer that might actually be tempting, it does also, like we said, I promise that I won't play it so I can give it to you. It would be easy to just say, oh, you promised that you won't play it? Thank you. Yeah. That way we can go ahead and get you voted out instead of Keith, because we would rather keep Keith.
The other thing that happens in this piece, which was somewhat subtle, but I liked it because it connected back to, like, Keith's earlier scene, was when he makes a comment like, I'm going to go take a nap. And Dalton Ross just absolutely has been, like, shafting him for that. Like, you're on the chopping block and you're just going to take a nap. None of the great Survivor players would take a nap. What are you doing? Well, and he made all these jokes about it. And what I said is that illustrated exactly what Keith's doing. Like, this is all stressing him out. He's going to take a nap. Like, he's going to mind his own business. Like, it's part of the charm of him. Like, that's sort of like his, country charm, is that he's just kind of minding his own business. And if it gets him voted out, he's not even going to be mad, I bet. Like, I feel like he'll kind of be like, oh well, if he has an idol and it happens, he'll be kind of frustrated with himself for like not choosing to use it.
Like, oh well, you got me.
Yeah. Well, let's say he goes through, he uses his idol in a situation where it's not necessary, and then a few episodes down the line, he gets voted out and didn't realize it was coming because he was just minding his own business. He'd be like, well, yeah, I guess I should have paid more attention, but I just wasn't interested in what they all had to say all the time, and this is what happens. Oh, well, you got me, like you said.
Yeah.
So I thought, like, the fact that, like, it stressed him out to the point where he didn't want to go argue or maneuver. He was just like, I just need to take a nap. I was like, that is awesome. Like, that is you. Like, he's so genuine because he doesn't feel like putting on any kind of pretense to try to win this game. Like, he's just going to do what he does and see what happens. And that's why it's even funnier when he, like, goes in tribal council and he's so stressed out because he has to make a decision and he has no information to make the decision. So I'm loving him. Like, not because he's like a great game player, but it's just amazing. Like, he's funny, like, he's a good guy, he's charming, and he's just playing in such a bizarrely unique way that is awesome. I'm glad he stayed, and that's why when you asked me, like, earlier what I thought about this episode, like, yeah, if I have to pick between Dale and Keith, like, Keith's way more interesting.
Oh yeah.
Dale,
yeah, no question.
Dale's interesting after he made fire when he broke his glasses,
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, in that context, I'm definitely happy, to keep Keith over Dale. The only other note that I really had from Tribal Council was just, again, we get another slightly weird emotional beat with Baylor, where, Missy starts talking about some emotional things, and Baylor starts crying, and Probst asks her about it, and she says, well, I always cry when my mom cries. It's like, but she's not crying. It's like, well, she was about to.
I love Probst for just calling that straight out.
I know. And then you see this slightly sheepish expression on Missy's face of like, yeah, what do I say there? Yeah, so I don't know, like, not in any extreme way, but we keep getting all these slightly weird beats between Baylor and Missy. Like, remember the sumo challenge where she hurt her lip and then it's like, I don't know, it was weird. Anyway, I don't have anything else to say about that except it was funny to blame her mom for that when her mom wasn't actually crying. It is, I guess, it's just that, again, that strange dynamic that we have these blood versus water relationships on the show. It does mix things up. Mm-hmm. And on that note, maybe that's another part of what is making John and Jacqueline the power couple, so to speak, because it's one thing to be in the swing vote and to recognize that as both a powerful but also dangerous position. But when you've got two of you, where unequivocally you can count on the other person, and you become a pair of swing votes with perfect trust there, that's a different situation. You know what I mean? You're a lot more powerful that way, because there's no way that people can just say, hey, we're tired of this person being the swing vote, so we'll vote them out, because there's two of you. And so it changes all of the dynamics there.
I know exactly what you mean. What you've really done there is illustrated, like, what I've now realized is that's what I was projecting onto Reed and Josh. You're talking about the dynamic there and, like, why, even though there's only two of them, why they might be dangerous. It's because we have the context of what is going on with Jacqueline and John, who are also overly affectionate and clearly, like, a couple that is not going to be broken. And so I was projecting that power that they hold onto Reed and Josh and saying, if this tribe goes to tribal council, then, that's something that could be something people want to break up, as opposed to like Jeremy, Natalie, and Julie being on the chopping block like we talked about. So that gives some context to like what I was thinking about those two.
Well, it does change the dynamics of the game when you have someone that you can trust perfectly, because ordinarily that's the whole tension of the game, is you have to trust somebody, but how can you trust somebody if you know that eventually it's going to come down to you or them? Like, even if you have a perfect alliance in a normal season, eventually one of you wants to win, and that means that the other one won't. But when you have a couple, in theory, you could have an end game where both of them make it to the final, and it's really okay with them for either to win.
Yep, that's more context to what I was saying, is that it comes down to it. Just because if John believes he can, he couldn't beat Jacqueline, so what? It's the Rob and Amber.
Yeah.
Scenario where he was willing even to sacrifice himself to put her up there, because isn't that what happened? Yeah.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the only time the one he didn't win, she won because he took it, essentially. I guess I didn't watch that season, so I'm only.
I don't remember for sure, because I feel like what it was is it's not like he ended up going out so that she could stay. It was more that they were both there at the end, and she won because he's the one that had to do all the dirty work.
Right.
And so people were mad at him, and so she won, but at the same time he's feeling like, well, that's fine. I did the dirty work so that she could stay clean, and if she wins, that's still both of us winning.
Yeah, so that's a little different, but yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so it does change things up, and it's why I like that they've brought it back for this season. But it's also why I'm glad they're not going to just do this every season, because I think it's an interesting variety, but I wouldn't want it every time.
No, because for the same reason that I'm enjoying Keith, I wouldn't enjoy someone like Keith every season. And Keith is on, I feel like, because Wes is a fan. And he brought Keith. And Keith doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't want to be there, but he's not into the whole thing. And we would have a lot more people like that who wouldn't necessarily be as entertaining as Keith. You get a lot of that on the Blood vs. Water. You get people who don't necessarily know the game as well as super fans.
Right. Yep.
So you want it to be variety, not the norm.
Yep. So, the votes go as planned for everyone except Dale. And who knows what Keith thought was happening, but it ends up being, one vote for Missy, which surely was Dale voting, and then the rest of the votes split between Dale and Keith. More for Dale. He didn't really have an idol, so he goes. Next time, merge, and then everything else is not really stuff happening so much as everybody talking about, oh my God, merge, and various out of context quotes that could mean anything. Dale goes out like a good sport, basically feeling like, I did everything that I could, and now I get to talk to Kelly. And but I think it's a good enough attitude to have, just in the sense that he wasn't a very proactive player until the last minute, when there was no reason not to just do anything. But he was fine. I didn't dislike him, but certainly he was not. I'd rather have him go than really any of the other likely choices.
That's where I was at.
Yep.
He was fine, but I was ready to be done with him.
All right, so I think that's probably it for next time, unless you want to talk a little bit about what do you think the dynamics are going to be as we go back into Merge?
Honestly, I thought about that when this ended. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm actually just going to sit back and wait. I didn't want to like start predicting or talking. Like there's so many things going on when you're dealing with couples and singles and the numbers and who was aligned before and who's made made friends now. The speculation is it would drive me nuts. So I've made it a point to just sit back and say I'm just going to watch it. I'm going to armchair quarterback the Merge.
All right. I was thinking that we talked a little bit about Natalie saying she, Jeremy, and Julie were on the chopping block, which might just mean that they are a loose alliance, and if they want to ally with Jacqueline and John and Missy and Baylor, that's 7, which would be a majority, but it's also perhaps not super tight. We would have Keith, who's going to rejoin with Wes and be another pair. Josh and Reed are still around, and then there's only so Jeremy was in that 7 that I mentioned, and then there's only Alec. So that would be Wes, Keith, Josh, Reed, and Alec 5 versus 7, and that might be how it shakes out, but. At the same time, I think out of everybody still on the show, I still think probably Josh is the smartest strategic player. Although that's just a general impression because all sorts of different things can change. So I at the same time, I feel like if anyone who could turn a numbers game around, it would probably be him out of who's left on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Probably the smartest strategic player, but that's almost damning in this season because there's a simplicity to the way that like some of the others are playing.
Yeah.
Alliances, which makes it difficult to reason it out via strategy. He's going to have to be very good. If it comes down the way that you're talking, like. It's going to be very difficult to get like Missy, Baylor, Jacqueline, and John because they're very much like they only see themselves as couples. They only see themselves as a group. They're not going to reason it out much farther. They're not really playing that way. And pull any of the singles onto them if Natalie feels really strongly that she's connected to Missy and she's connected to Jeremy and Julie, to move them over to Josh's side is going to be hard because all you're doing is, no matter what the singles do, because of their numbers, they're always going to end up on the outside of whatever core is going to be there. To make the numbers work, there's always going to have to be 2 pairs and then 3 singles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always going to be 4 versus 3 if they actually made it work that way.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very difficult for him to do that. The way that he's going to have to work the numbers is almost like trying to build a bigger than 7 or get with Missy and John and Jacqueline and make them a 6 or plus a single that's expendable. I mean, I think he could do it, but it's tricky with, like I said, the simplicity that some of the others are using.
Yeah. Well, we shall see.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm going to wait and see.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching and or listening. Remember, you can head on over to christianaellis.com for the podcast notes, and we'll be back for the next episode. And so we hope to talk to you then. All right. Good night.